All right, everybody, this is Stephanie Vance, and we are going to go ahead and get started on our What to Know Before You Go session. And just to double check on the audio, if you can hear the sound of my voice, click the raise your hand button again. I promise I will not continue the incessant hand raising. All right, great. Hands raised, ready to go. So what we're doing today is we're talking about what's going to be happening next week when you all come to Washington, D.C. And we're going to try and make sure the weather is beautiful, although it's been pretty crappy the last week. So maybe you guys will bring in a new breath of fresh air. And our topics today, we're going to just share a couple of the logistics about the webinar. Then we're going to talk about the logistics of the day. We're going to give you some homework assignments, because one of the main points we hope you get out of this is that this is really a sales call that you're doing here in Washington, D.C. So you need to be prepared not only with your message, but also with information about your companies, the connections to the district, etc. And I'll give you some resources for doing that. And we're also going to hear from Ed Orlett, who's going to talk about some of the issues that are happening. So quickly about the webinar, everyone is joined in a mute-only mode, and what that means is you could speak up all you wanted, but I would be unable to hear you. And the reason why we do that is because we want to mitigate any background noise, but you can ask questions using the question box. You'll see that there should be a questions box next in your toolbar. You hit the little plus sign next to it, and you can type in questions, and we'll address those as we go along. And if we don't get to your question during the session, don't worry, we're not abandoning you. We will answer your question after the session, or you can feel free to email some of the folks who you'll have the contact information for. And if you don't see the toolbar, you should see a red background with a white arrow on it, and if you click on that, that should open up your toolbar for you. One of the questions we always get is, will this information be available after the call? And it will. We'll have the PowerPoint and the recording, and we are going to be pushing our slow computers to get the recording ready for you as soon as possible. So hopefully that will be up by the end of the day. Now, for those I don't know, or even if I do know you, I'm Stephanie Vance, and I've been involved with NAED for however many years you guys have been doing the fly-in. It's been great. And my background is I used to work on Capitol Hill. I was a lobbyist here in Washington, D.C. I've written a bunch of books. So my role is to really make sure that you feel as comfortable as you possibly can when going into your meetings. And I'll talk about some ways to be prepared for that, as well as what to do in the meeting and how to follow up. So speaking of your meetings, etc., I want to get started by opening a short poll. So you'll see the question box should come up on your screen asking you if you've been to the Congressional Fly-In before. And yes, no, or you're not sure. And if not sure is your answer, we have bigger problems. And I'll leave a few moments for the votes to come in. Wow, you guys rock. We're at 95% of the votes in. So I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So you'll see that the majority of us, 65% of us, haven't been to the Congressional Fly-In. So we'll make sure that we give you the details that you need as a first-timer. And for those who have been before, if you want to send in comments in the chat box or in the question box just to make sure that we're addressing things that you think are important, we can raise those comments as well. All right. So the logistics for the conference, hopefully you guys have all been to the NAED Fly-In page. This has all the information about the schedule, the travel, the registration, some of your frequently asked questions. There's all kinds of fun little videos of folks from your group who've been to this before. I know there's one somewhere that is of Ed showing how not to do a congressional meeting, which always makes me laugh. But if you have any questions about the logistics of the conference, this is the place to go. It's on the NAED page under the Events tab. Now, the scheduling process. I'm going to be turning to Katie in a moment, who's going to talk a little bit about our Advocacy Day app, which is going to give you a ton of information related to scheduling. But I just want to make sure everyone knows that we are doing the scheduling. So we've been working closely with Ed, who's been letting us know who should go where and what meetings would be useful. And these are generally based on constituency level. So we're trying to schedule them based on where a facility is, where your headquarters are. But we really always need to demonstrate to the office that you have some connection to the district. So we'll talk about the app and how that will show you the schedules and show you the legislators you're meeting with. But to just at the outset, just be clear, we're making all those meetings, so we actually prefer if you don't call the offices, because then the offices get mad at us, and no one wants that. A couple of the meeting details that we're keeping in mind as we're scheduling these meetings. We always do ask for a meeting with the member, him or herself. Those are always difficult to get. And a lot of times the legislator staff will be taking the meeting. That's actually, excuse me, a good thing, because the staff people are going to have a lot more time to talk to you. They're going to be a lot more engaged in the discussion. A meeting with the member usually turns out to be what I call a grip and grin, where you basically shake their hand and talk to them for 30 seconds. But the staff people can really delve into the issues with you. So do know that while we request the meeting with the member, don't be disappointed if the meeting is with the staff person. The length of the meetings are usually about 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes you get a legislator who just wants to talk your ear off, which is great. So we always try to schedule those meetings with the 15 to 20-minute time frame, or even up to half an hour in mind, and giving you plenty of travel time in between the meetings. Location-wise, there's offices on the Senate side and there's offices on the House side, and they're across the Capitol from one another. So we do try to make sure that we are scheduling in a way that doesn't have you crossing back and forth between the Senate and the House. Although the meetings are with people who have schedules with other people, so fortunately we can't always do that, but we do our best to keep those things in mind. And speaking of the Capitol, this is getting around the Capitol. Again, on your app that Katie's going to go into more detail in a moment, there are maps, and there's the cool mapping feature that tells you where you are and how to get to where you want to go, which I always find very useful. I just do what my phone tells me. But just as a quick overlay, over on this side near Constitution Avenue Northeast is the Senate side of the Capitol, and these are the three buildings there. They're Russell, Dirksen, and Hart. And then on the House side of the Capitol, you have Rayburn, Longworth, and Cannon, and these are where all of the congressional offices are. In some cases, you may go into the Capitol, but for the most part, these meetings will be in the House and Senate offices. And all of that information will be on your schedule, so you won't have to look any of that up. This is just the basic information about the layout. And so I mentioned Katie, who I've been talking about with great enthusiasm for the last couple of minutes. So Katie, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn it over to you so that you can tell people about the app and all the cool scheduling stuff that they will get there.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Katie, and I'm part of the team here that's been scheduling their congressional visits. So today I'd like to tell you about our new Advocacy Day app, which you'll have access to for your Hill Day this year. And Stephanie, if you could go to my first slide, that would be great. So Advocacy Day is a multi-platform app. It's available for iPhone or iPad in the App Store, or for Android in the Google Play Store. You just search Advocacy Day, all one word, or you can also access the web version of the app from the link listed here. Now before I go on, I just want to say, don't worry about writing any of this down right now. You will receive detailed instructions on how to download and use the app, as well as your personalized login, and we're sending that all out to you tomorrow. You'll get all of this information again. I'm just giving you a basic overview for now. So let me just go over the basic features for you and give you an idea of what you'll be able to do with the app. If you could go to the next slide, please. So one of the main features of the app is that you can view your congressional visit schedule. When you log into the app tomorrow, you are automatically brought to this schedule page. In addition to viewing your meetings, you will also receive push notifications if there are any changes. And we will also call your cell phone with any changes when you're on the Hill. We'll also provide you with a printed itinerary of your meetings on site. So don't worry, if you're not really an app person, you'll still be given a copy of your schedule with all of the information you need. There is one important thing I'd like to note about the schedules. You'll be able to log into the app and view your schedule as early as tomorrow. And if you log into the app early, you may find that not all of your congressional visits are finalized yet. This is because due to the fluidity of the congressional schedule, many offices won't even set a meeting until a day or two before the event. And also the meetings that have a confirmed time are also subject to change up until the last minute. Congressional offices are constantly calling us and changing the times and locations of meetings on us at the very last minute. So please just keep in mind when you're looking at your schedule that it's tentative and anything is subject to change. Now, if you see that one of your meetings conflicts with your travel schedule or anything else, please let us know as soon as possible so that we can rearrange the time for you. And please be sure to still check in with us on site as well and pick up your printed itinerary so that we know you're in town. Next slide. So now I want to talk about some of the features you can utilize while you're on the Hill and in your meetings. First, as Stephanie mentioned, you'll be able to map to your meetings, including GPS-enhanced walking directions, which I find very helpful.
Katie, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're breaking up a little bit. Is there somewhere you can, I think you might be on a cell. That's okay.
Is this any better?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. So you'll be able to map to your meetings, like I said, including GPS-enhanced walking directions. You'll also be able to take notes about your meetings, view talking points that you should try to touch on during your meetings, and view your leave-behind materials right in the app. You also have the option to email these electronic versions of the leave-behinds. So in addition to handing a piece of paper to the staff person you met with, you can also email it directly to them as well. You'll also be able to fill out a feedback survey about each of your meetings, which we highly encourage you to do, as NAED really appreciates hearing about how your meetings went, any follow-up that may need to be done, and so on. There are also some social features in the app that you can take advantage of. You can post to your Twitter or Facebook about your meetings straight from the app, and you can also send messages to other participants through a secure chat platform. So for example, if you're trying to coordinate with someone who's in the same meeting as you, you can send them a meeting through the app to coordinate on when and where to meet up. Next slide, please. So those are the features that will facilitate you while you're on the Hill. Now I want to talk a little bit about the features that you can take advantage of as soon as we send you your login information tomorrow. One of the cool things you can take advantage of is that you can research the members of Congress you will be meeting with in advance. From the Legislator tab in the app, you can click on any member to read their bio, view their committee information, their social media pages, website, and newsfeed. And you'll also be able to view the bills that are relevant to your issues. You can see a summary of the bill, the status of the bill, whether your legislators have co-sponsored or not, and if there have been any votes on the bill. This is a great tool that you can use to research your members and issues in advance so you're totally prepared when you come to DC. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to reiterate again that the app instructions you receive with your login will include how to navigate around the app and access all of these features. The app is pretty intuitive, but you can also reach out to us at any time with any questions. And of course, we can answer questions about the app when we're on site with you. My contact information, as well as my colleague Kirsten's contact information, is listed here. And there's also a section of the app where you can send questions directly. So that's it for the app. Be on the lookout tomorrow for your login and instructions, and I look forward to seeing you all. And with that, I'll pass it back to Stephanie. Stephanie?
Great, thank you. What Katie forgot to say about the app is that it is super cool and the best thing ever. We are very excited about it. So we look forward to your thoughts on it. First of all, you have to say it's cool, and then you'll have to tell us what we need to improve about it. So if you have any questions about the app, you go ahead and type them into the question box now, or you also have Katie and Kirsten's information so that when you actually download it and are playing around with it, they can address any questions that you might have. And I'm going to turn it over to Ed, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the issues that you'll be discussing. Now, remember that when this issue overview is what's going on right now on the issues, the Congress may decide to do totally different things by next week. So this is kind of the overview, and I know that Ed will make sure that you're completely up to date when you get on site. So Ed, I've unmuted your line. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again for your support of this event. It truly is, I think, a unique experience in the industry, and something that allows us as an industry to go up there and do some good, and do a lot of good in one day, but also helps us individually cultivate relationships with members of Congress, and will help our business in the long term, all while having quite a bit of fun, I think, in the process. So those are good things, and I think it's okay to look at this as a fun event. You know, it's neat to go to Washington and to walk the halls of Congress and, you know, feel like you're a part of what's happening there, because the privilege we have and the rights we have as citizens of the United States to be involved in this process is something that a lot of people fought for and a lot of people around the world are really jealous of. So Stephanie, go ahead and jump to that first slide, and we'll talk about our issue agenda. These are the bills that we would like you to be discussing in your meetings on the Hill. You know, those of you who have done this before know that we have a strategy at NAED of focusing on issues closest to our industry, not necessarily the stuff you see on Fox News or MSNBC. Stuff that really is sort of under the radar that really impacts our industry and the way you do business. So, you know, ultimately, what you talk about in your meetings is up to you. They're your meetings, and if you have local issues or issues in your region that you need to discuss with a member of Congress, if they can help you, that's all to the good, and we encourage you to make this meeting your own. But you know, of course, we don't want you to ever speak against any of the issues that we're supporting. But you know, try to stay focused on our agenda and use the talking points that we give you on these things. And I'd also encourage you not to think in terms of the checklist. You don't need to go into every meeting and just check off all these issues and go through every one of them with every meeting. It's good to think about these meetings strategically and try to identify an issue or two, not many more than that, where you're going to be able to do some work with the member of Congress. So in other words, if you go in and you're meeting with a very conservative Republican and you see from our talking points that they've got a problem with the wind production tax credit in the Expire Act, you know, maybe there's a better issue to talk about with them where we can actually get some support from them. So think strategically about that. A lot of these guys will want you to come in and just kind of check off, well, okay, we're with you on all these things. Well, okay, that's fine, but let's talk about what we're going to do about it. And if you have a difficult disagreement with somebody, that's okay. We're all Americans, and hopefully over time we can change their mind and bring them over to our side. So let's talk about the issues, each one of these issues in turn specifically, and I'll try not to get too much in the weeds, and any questions you have, let me know. Also, if you want to have a little more time on one of these particular issues, I'm happy to give you a call and have a conversation about one or more of them. Just let me know. So go ahead, Stephanie, jump to that first Marketplace Fairness Act. This bill, it seems to be on the top of a lot of your radar screens. And the politics on this bill are not easy, so I want to spend a little time talking about what is colloquially called the Internet Sales Tax, but we call the bill the Marketplace Fairness Act. In the House and in the Senate, there's a newer version called the Marketplace and Internet Tax Fairness Act. Both of them will get us as an industry where we want to be, which is a level playing field between online retailers, online sellers, and brick-and-mortar folks. So you see the two bills there, the version in the Senate and the version in the House. And it's always good to refer to bill numbers where you can in your meetings. It's also important to know that there is opposition to this bill. While Amazon has gotten behind the idea because of their growth, eBay stands in strong opposition to this because of their business model. And it's also important to know that the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank that really has a lot of influence over Republican lawmakers, is opposed to this bill. They call it a new tax, which those of us, I think, on this call know that it's not a new tax. And some House Republicans, especially House Republicans, but also some Senate Republicans, will go along with that and say, well, that Internet sales tax is a new tax. Don't let them get away with that, because the argument is really pretty easy to make. And this bill is one that we could actually see Senate action on fairly soon. So it's really timely for us to be on the Hill. So the Senate version, the important thing to remember about the Senate version is, while the Senate passed a version of the Marketplace Fairness Act last year, it hasn't gone anywhere in the House. So the Senate has made some changes to the Marketplace Fairness Act to address some of the concerns that opponents had about exposure to multiple sales tax audits from different jurisdictions within states, and simplification in the cost of implementing. So the Senate has made some changes to that bill to make it better. and they actually tied a very popular expiring provision of the law that puts a moratorium on taxing Internet services. So they tied that popular moratorium to the bill to try and get the House to act on it. So go ahead. Let's go ahead and jump one. Important talking points on this bill is it doesn't require any state to do anything. It allows a state to require out-of-state sellers to collect taxes on remote purchases. It doesn't force anybody to do anything. The states have to take their own action. They have to do some simplification to their tax collection regime. There's a small seller exemption in there. They also have to provide tax collection software for free. So, you know, a lot of the talking points against this bill from some conservative groups is that it's a new tax. It's not a new tax. States are missing out on billions of dollars in tax revenue every year because they cannot force these out-of-state retailers to collect that tax. And I think, as everybody on this call knows, the volume of online sales continues to grow rapidly, and this is just not something we can continue to ignore as we have in the past. So those are some of the talking points on this one. We do expect, or we hope to see, some Senate action because of the way they've combined the popular moratorium on Internet service, taxing Internet service, with this bill. We hope to see some action on that in the Senate pretty soon. It's going to continue to be a tough row in the House. However, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned on the last slide, there is a House Republican who's taking a crack at getting some changes to the bill in the House to get some momentum there too. So those are some of the things we'll talk about with the Internet sales tax bill. Let's go ahead. The next issue I wanted to talk about is LIFO. As those of you, we figure close to half of our member companies use LIFO inventory valuation. And we have always historically, as a group, relied on conservative House Republicans to stand with us on protecting LIFO. Unfortunately, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, the Tax Writing Committee, came out with a tax overhaul proposal that called for LIFO repeal. And so that really kind of raised our alarm bells about having somebody in one body of Congress at least protecting LIFO for us. Now, the good news is Dave Camp came out with this proposal to repeal LIFO, but his tax proposal in general was roundly criticized, and it doesn't stand any chance of going anywhere. In fact, he didn't even introduce a bill. But he did call for LIFO repeal, so we need to be aware that we can't count on Republicans to be the firewall against LIFO repeal. Now, there is a bill that we reference, S-277, by Senator Whitehouse. That bill's not going anywhere. We just include it as a bill number to reference in your meetings. If somebody wants a bill to refer to that repeals LIFO, that's a bill that does it. And that's a bill that we obviously oppose. Now, when I say opposition there up at the top, some Democrats call LIFO a tax dodge. And so really they say, well, this is tax dodge, we need to get rid of it. It's a loophole. And, oh, by the way, 80% of LIFO reserves are held by oil companies, and they're not the most popular folks. So it's really a revenue raiser. And if you get right down to it, when you talk with staffers, they'll admit that, because they see that there's, in some cases, $112 billion in additional revenue to be gained from the Treasury over a 10-year period. Well, the question is, while you recapture those taxes on LIFO reserves, then what are you going to do? Come right back to us looking for more money. And so, you know, you have to ask, what's the policy? What are we trying to accomplish here, or is it just a way to raise money? Now, some, again, up at the top where you see the opposition, some will claim that International Financial Reporting Standards, or IFRS, do not allow LIFO. And so to harmonize with global financial reporting standards, we need to repeal LIFO. Well, that's, again, that's a pretty thin justification. You know, and by that standard, we should probably also be on the metric system, but we're not. Let's go ahead, Stephanie. The next bill I want to talk about is the so-called Expire Act. And what this bill is a lot of you who have been to the fly-in have heard us over the years talking about the Commercial Buildings Tax Deduction, or EPACT 179D. And you've heard us talk about that in terms of extenders, of tax extenders. And, you know, one thing you'll learn in Washington is that in order to get attention, you need to have a really good acronym for your bill name. So the EXPIRE Act is the tortured acronym, Expiring Provisions Improvement, Reform, and Efficiency Act of 2014. Essentially what this was a way to get a bunch of these tax provisions that have to be renewed every year or else they expire, about 50 of them, put them on one bill for one vote. One of those tax deductions is the Commercial Buildings Tax Deduction, which is now expired, but because of the lighting tax deduction, it was a good selling tool for our industry, so we really want to see that extended. Another very important tax provision on there was the higher limits to the Section 179 equipment expensing and also the bonus depreciation. Those provisions have expired, and the limits have reverted for 179 to their I think 2001 level of $25,000 of a maximum deduction. So we'd like to see that $500,000 exemption or expensing cap extended, and it would happen under this bill through the end of 2015. Some Republicans have called for looking at each one of these tax incentives individually, and so they have voiced some opposition to this particular bill. Stephanie, go ahead. There's also a wind energy production tax credit in the bill, which some of the Republican lawmakers oppose because they don't like, as the Democrats don't like to quote unquote subsidize big oil, the Republicans don't like to subsidize quote unquote big wind. So they'd say, well, why don't we look at these things individually? And that's a good idea, but there's 50 of them, and they can't seem to pass anything these days. So just for simplicity's sake, we really need to get these things dealt with at once. We had an opportunity to pass this bill in the Senate in May, and like the next bill we're going to talk about, it got hung up in procedural issues, and it basically a little bit of a fight between Democrats and Republicans over the amendment process. And I won't get too far into that because it's not as critical that you understand the way amendments are dealt with in the U.S. Senate. But suffice it to say, Republicans wanted to get some votes. They wanted up or down votes on issues like the Keystone XL pipeline. And in order to get those votes, they were trying to force the Senate Democrats to, they were saying, either let us vote on these things or we're going to hold up these bills. So a bill like the EXPIRE Act, or the next one we're going to talk about, Shaheen-Portman, which otherwise would be an agreed-to bill, and a bill with a lot of support and very little opposition, got held up because Republicans wanted to make a political point against Harry Reid, saying you're not running the Senate fairly, we can't get votes on our amendments, and so as a consequence, we're not going to do anything. So, what could have been a good result for us ended up being very frustrating with the EXPIRE Act. Go ahead, Stephanie. Shaheen-Portman is the name of the sponsors of the Energy Savings and Industrial Competitiveness Act. And those of you who have been at the fly-in have seen this one for a couple of years as well. This bill ended up suffering the same fate as the EXPIRE Act when Republicans and Democrats in the Senate couldn't agree on an amendment process. The bill is really pretty innocuous. It doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. In fact, the bill really got simplified over the last couple of years because the two sponsors just said, look, we want to pass an energy bill. We want some, there's some sort of good government things that we can do in terms of making federal buildings more efficient and federal buildings really show leadership in energy efficient buildings in the economy. The federal government's the largest landlord in the United States. So there's some things in there. There's some things on code, modernization, and harmonization. And most important to us, though, as an industry, is there are rebate programs for energy-efficient motors and transformers. And that's something that couldn't hurt the industry by any stretch of the imagination. Don't know how much they'll help, but depends what the rebate programs would end up looking like, which the Department of Energy would write the rules on those. But there's an opportunity to sell more stuff, and so we are obviously in support of that. Again, you'll see in the opposition, and this is coming up a lot. The Heritage Foundation opposes this bill too, and they just say that that the code provisions are dictating to states how they should enact building codes, and I don't think that's a fair criticism as someone who actually really believes in the state's ability to write their own rules on things. This is more the DOE rulemaking process under these energy codes is a very consultative process. It's not a top-down, take this or leave it kind of forcing states to adopt codes. So don't think it's a fair criticism from the Heritage Foundation. And it's funny because we're a business group, and it's always weird to find yourself on the other side of the of an issue from the Heritage Foundation on most of your policy issues. But here we are. Stephanie, go ahead. And as two things that I like to point out about this, and those of you who are at the first fly-in, remember when this bill in its original incarnation came around, there was a prohibited acts provision, which we won't go into here, but suffice it to say it was not good for our members. It was not good for distribution, and we opposed it back then, and were successful in getting that taken out of the bill. It hasn't shown up since, and again this year it's not in there. So we're all in favor of this bill. Again, which ordinarily would have been a very easy lift in the Senate and a very bipartisan vote, ended up falling subject to the disagreement over the amendment policy in the Senate. So we'd like to still see action on this and the Expire Act, and so our messaging on these bills is, look, we understand there's problems with the way you guys, with your procedures, and you have a hard time getting votes on things, but this is important to our industry, and you need to get something done. Don't make us suffer the consequences of your inability to have a fair process on considering amendments to bills. All right, go ahead on. The next issue we want to talk about is any tax reform proposal that comes out. We want to see fairness for closely held entities, S-corps, and the like. There's too much talk around Washington right now about reforming the corporate tax code. And while that is definitely something that needs to happen, we also need to understand that at least 60%, probably more of our members, function as pass-through entities and S-corps or S-corps. And changing that corporate tax rate is not going to help our folks, especially when you consider that we refer back to that Chairman Camp tax proposal that we've already talked about that was a nasty one. He called for individual rates of 10 and 25%, but then he would have stuck the higher income earners with a 10% surtax. And, higher income earners have already absorbed some increases in Medicare and payroll taxes and investment income taxes under the Obamacare legislation, such to the point where a lot of pass-throughs are facing effective tax rates well over 40%, and it sends the wrong message. It's a way of punishing success in entrepreneurism to ignore that a lot of these S-corps pass the profits through, and individuals pay on their individual tax returns. So the message here is to continue to tell policymakers it's not okay for you to simply address corporate tax rates. If you really want to address the way business is taxed in this country, you have to also look at pass-through entities, and you have to understand what you've done to us recently. All right, go ahead, Stephanie. We also want to talk about ending the death tax. This is something that you'll hear more about during our advocacy training on Tuesday, and we have bills that we can reference here, House and Senate bills, that would both very simply end the death tax. There's not much to it; just would take it out of the tax code. There was the fiscal cliff deal did set a permanent top marginal rate of 40% with the $5 million exemption. So there is at least some predictability there, because it seemed like for a while there, every year, the death tax was a political football getting kicked around, and the numbers were changing consistently, which makes estate planning very complicated, or more complicated than it already is. So at least there's some permanence there, but we'd like to permanently eliminate it, and these bills would do that. The opposition in this case is groups like MoveOn.org and other liberal budget groups that say, look, this is how wealth is created in this country, or concentrated in this country. It's inherited, and this is a bad thing. The reality in what we say, two things about this bill when Democrats bring those issues up is, one, the death tax may actually cost U.S. Treasury revenue because it's a one-time tax event versus the growth of an ongoing, concern. And the other unintended consequence that we tell Democrats that they never thought about was, look, we're in a consolidating industry, and there's a lot of the big companies in our industry are getting bigger, and that's happening because smaller family businesses have to think about selling the company in order, to keep it going when one generation is faced with the decision to pass it on to the next generation. So you actually can have an unintended consequence of continuing to consolidate industries into larger and larger companies by making it very difficult for those companies to stay within the family. And that argument tends to resonate. Go ahead. Two more quick ones that I want to talk about. Those of you who have been to the Fly-In and in the past have seen the RAINS Act. Again, a good acronym, the Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny Act. In the House, it's sponsored by Todd Young from Indiana, and the Senate, Rand Paul from Kentucky. The reason we talk about the RAINS Act is a lot of you tell us that government regulations cost your company, and that they make it harder for you to operate. So that's a difficult conversation to have, because then when you try to get specific about what issue it is or what regulation it is and how much it costs, there's not a lot of data there, and there's not a lot of consistency. So it can be different regulations can cost different people different amounts. So what we're saying is the RAINS Act is a great way to talk about regulations with policymakers, to say, look, right now proposed rules from the federal government undergo an economic impact analysis, and they put a cost on them. So if there's a cost of annual economic impact of $100 million or more, a proposed rule is considered a major rule. That is already current practice. So what this bill would do would simply say, look, anytime there's a major rule, Congress gets to vote on it, up or down. So it's not meant to hamstrung the administrative state, which does a lot of rulemaking and a lot of regulations are important. But if they're really big and really impactful, let Congress have its say. It's not, some people would say, well, that's a constitutional issue. The president, should be able to do this rulemaking. Well, Congress has a constitutional oversight role over the executive, and that's all this is. This is a legitimate exercising of that oversight role. And so this is a simple way to talk about regulations in your meetings. That's why we talk about the RAINS Act. Next. I'm running long here, so I'm going to be quick on this one. The last bill we talk about is the Metal Theft Prevention Act. And this is a bill that, quite honestly, not all of our members are on board with. But metal theft is big in our industry, and a lot of people, when they hear about this bill, say, well, isn't stealing already illegal? Yes, it is. But the important thing to remember about the Metal Theft Prevention Act is that first of all, it doesn't preempt any state laws. But where there are limitations in state laws, and there may not be really good security or requirements in place for scrap dealers, this is where I think the magic of the Metal Theft Prevention Act is it puts some common sense requirements on scrap dealers, because they should have to maintain records of who they're buying from and how much they're paying for stuff, and so we can see who may be stealing and trying to fence metal. And then also it limits how much they can pay in cash to make that paper trail more robust. Common sense. And like I said earlier, our research said 85% of our distributors have had problems with metal theft. And so if this has been an issue for you and you want to talk about this bill, it's a good one to bring in. And again, it's as you can see there, there's versions in the House and Senate, bipartisan issue, Republican sponsor in the House, Democrat in the Senate. So that's all I've got right now. Again, anything, any one of these that you want to talk about in greater detail, I'm in the office all day tomorrow. I'm hitting the road Monday to get out to Washington early, but I can give you a call back if you just want to let me know if you want to talk some more. Happy to do it. Really appreciate you all taking the time to be there and to help us do this. It's going to be a great day. With that, I'll turn it back to Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, Ed. And I did have one question that came in on the REINS Act that might be something that everyone would need to know, which is the annual economic impact nationwide, what is the real number for referencing the REINS Act?
The real number, I'm not sure I'm following that, but I will say, yes, the economic impact is nationwide.
Okay. And then there's a question, what is the total revenue for individual taxes compared to corporate taxes?
That's a good question. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I will get it, and we'll include something in the follow-up material for you all.
And I did have a couple quick logistical questions. Will folks get a list of the participants, the NAED members, with names, titles, and company names ahead of time, and how many people are participating?
We hadn't planned on doing that, but we can do that. I'll include it. We'll include it with the follow-up from this material. We've got 46 members there this year. It's our largest turnout yet, and we're real excited about that.
Great. And one last note, this is just a note. So someone had pointed out that 179D is crucial for LED retrofit projects.
Yep.
So something to bear in mind. All right. So now that you've gotten all this information about all of these different issues and your head is crammed all full of things that you're worried about whether you can know them enough, I wanted to make a couple points. And actually, Ed, I'm going to go ahead and remute your line. But let me know if you want to jump in. I wanted to raise just a couple points related to that, and then I'm going to go into a few quick actions. We'll wrap up in the next 10 minutes. But first of all, you've heard a lot of different issues. You don't need to be an expert on all of them. The staff do not expect you to be an expert on all of them. You should look through the policy materials and pick the ones that you're going to raise based on two factors. One, which is what is the most important for you? What for your business, if your life was a concern or death tax is a concern, make sure that you're talking about the ones that are most relevant to you, and then also focusing on the ones that the legislator, him or herself, might be interested in and might be a good fit for them. All of this information about the policy issues will be on the app, so the talking points, pardon me, the talking points will be all on the app, so don't worry about that. You can definitely get that there, but it will also be sent via email. Another thing I thought was interesting as you went through the issues is that this is an interesting bipartisan agenda, and I think a lot of people believe business groups come in and they're focused on one side of the aisle, but I think you guys have a great point to make that you are looking to work with both sides. So with that in mind, I want to give you what I call pre-call actions, because when you think about what you're doing in Washington, D.C. next week, it's basically a sales call. Nothing more complicated than that. You're going in and you're trying to sell an idea to people who you hope are buying it. And when you think about your own sales calls, you wouldn't go in completely unprepared, not knowing anything about the organization or the company. You would definitely do a little research ahead of time and make sure that you're sort of pitching the things that make the most sense to the people you're talking to. So here's how you do that sort of pre-call information. The first thing I'd start with is to know who you're talking to. And we showed you some information on the app that you can use to look up bio information and that sort of thing. I also want to make sure that you know the NAED Government Action Center site. This is accessible from the NAED.org website, the main page. And here you can get some of the basic information about the issues, current action alerts. I also suggest that you take a look at your elected officials, and you can, I'm just going to use a quick zip code here. And when you take a look at the app, you'll see who the elected officials are that you're going to be working with. But you'll see here's the list. I put federal and state in there as well. So if we look at one of the legislators, you'll see from here you can get access to their website and a range of other information. Now, when you look at their website, I strongly suggest that you look at the websites of the people that you'll be talking to. And when you go to their sites, you'll see a couple things that would be most of interest. The one I strongly suggest you take a look at is the Issues tab. Now, they might not have anything that's very specific to these issues that we're talking about. It won't be, here's how I feel on this particular bill. But you can read through these and you can see how they talk about issues. What is some of the language that they use, so that when you go into their office, you can use similar language. So, for example, this is how Mr. LaMalfa talks about tax reform. And, you know, these three principles, you know, that's something you might want to stress when you walk into the office. And you'll see here that there's some recent press releases and information on what he's doing on that. So, strong suggestion, go look at your legislators, take a look at their websites, and read issues or legislation tabs. They'll usually have something that says either one of those or sometimes both. Another idea is to go to congress.gov. And at congress.gov, you can look up bills that your legislators have introduced. Sometimes they have that information on their webpage, so you can sometimes look it up straight from there. But every legislator has a different page, so you know they might not have that particular bill listed. But if we go here and let's just, well, I'm going to pick someone at random because I want to show you how this works. So if you look at this particular legislator, he's relatively new. So you see he's got 293 bills, which is actually not a lot. But what you really want to get to is the legislation that he cares most about, which are the bills that he's sponsored. So you click on the sponsored legislation link, and you'll see you get a much smaller number of bills. The reason why I'm suggesting this to you is not to necessarily look at it just in the context of the bills that you'll be talking about, but to, again, see what kinds of things interest him and what kinds of things you might find appropriate to raise. So, you know, in his case, it looks like he's interested in some veterans issues. He wants to change a post office name. You have a few things that you can at least know that he's interested in those things before you go into the office, because remember, with your sales calls, you like to make pitches that are relevant to the people that you're trying to talk to. So that's the three things that I think you should do before you get ready. That's the first one, which is to learn a little bit about your audience. And so this is a quick homework assignment to look at the issues tabs on their web pages, to look at the bills that they've introduced. If you want bonus points, you can sign up for their e-newsletters and also check them out on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook is always nice because you can find, you will see that they've been in the district recently to talk to groups and or individuals. They always have pictures of that, and you can make note of that and say, oh, I saw you're in the district talking to so-and-so. Even that one little sentence demonstrates that you care enough about what they're doing in the community that they should pay attention to you. All right, so that was number one, which was knowing a little bit about your audience. Number two is to make sure that you know your message. And we're actually going to talk on site a fair amount about coming up with a winning message for your meetings. And I'll give you a message formula that will help you integrate a lot of these policy issues that we've just talked about. But what I want you to think about now, I talk about the SPIT technique because, as Ed mentioned, everyone has to have an acronym in Washington, D.C., and so this is mine. It stands for specific, personal, informative, and timely. So what that means is you want to be specific about what you want. That's why Ed went through a number of different issues and where we stand in terms of support or opposition. If you don't remember all of that, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You have all the talking papers, but you can always follow up with the office. That's really a good idea anyways. Personal is all about making it relevant to the legislator in terms of the people that he or she represents. It's not just about what 3 out of 4 Americans think. It's about what 3 out of 4 people in their district think. And that's why you're here in D.C. is to tell that personal and local story. And I'll give you a list in a moment of some of the things I think you should make sure you know about your business before you walk in the door. I is informative, and that I just said it's personal and personal stories, but you also want to have good facts and figures and information behind it. And again, I'll give you a list of some of the things I think you should know. And then timely. Now is actually a good time to be here, although people are feeling, oh, it's the elections, maybe they're not focusing so much on legislating. But they do have to get stuff done before the end of this congressional session. So they are really trying to push on a number of things. And so you'll find that either things that we want will have an opportunity to make some more movement, or things that we don't want will be moving much faster than we would like them to. So this is definitely a good time to be here, and you'll find that there's a lot of people who are going to be interested in the issues that you're raising. Now, things to know about you and your business. It's funny, I found that you know your business backward and forward, but sometimes you might get into a congressional office and forget a whole bunch of stuff. So just make sure you've got the little talking points in your head, number of facilities or outlets in the district, if you've got a revenue range that you would be willing to share, the number of people you employ. Types of clients you work with is always very interesting, and to me that connects to your role in the process of getting electricity into homes and buildings. I know that sounds very basic, but most of the time when people here on Capitol Hill hear the word electrical distributors, they think, I have electricity in my house. These people are in some way related to that. And so you need to make sure that you show them, how you get from the manufacturers to the folks who are actually putting the fixtures into the buildings. You need to demonstrate your role in that process. And so you might be working with architects. You might be working with designers. You might be working with individual homeowners, commercial building developers. You need to demonstrate that you touch a lot of different clients and you work with a lot of different kinds of clients in the community, because the legislators will want to know that local connection. Also, if you've got any extra benefits, if you work with Habitat for Humanity, or if you have a charity program that you do, or Community Giving Day, that's something that legislators will want to know, because they want to know that you're more than just sort of a big business in their community. They want to know that you're really a part of it in terms of how you benefit other people. So that's the number 2 pre-call action. Number 1 was to know who you're talking to, and those resources were on the NAED site. It will also be on the app, and you have the congress.gov page. The number 2 is to make sure that you know your message and know some of those really basic things about your business. And now number 3 is to think about your follow-up plan. Most people will not most of the time you will not walk into a sales call thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not going to have a follow-up plan. Most of the time when you walk in, you have some sort of follow-up plan, what's going to happen after the meeting, and how you are going to connect with that person and to make sure that they still hear your message and that they're still interested in whatever it is that you're selling. So before you walk into a legislator's office, make sure you have some sort of follow-up plan too. And that might be connecting with them back at home, visiting them in the district, putting together a site visit, connecting with them on social media, taking pictures of the meeting and posting them on social media. All of these are different follow-up plan options, and we'll talk a lot in D.C. about some of these things that you can raise with them. But my main point here is to just make sure you have an idea of that follow-up plan before you walk in the door. And so you'll see I have a list here, some question list of things that you might want to think about, your thank you notes, whether they're having upcoming town hall meetings, what you can show them at home, etc. And in terms of making sure you know something about your business, I have a note from Ed that you will have personalized company handouts with numbers of locations and employees, as well as your spotlight issue. And you'll also have the overall brochure. So that information you will have ahead of time. Just make sure that you have that in your head and you remember that when you're talking to the legislator and he or the staff person and they ask, what do you want to tell us about your business? Because I know people get nervous and they forget that stuff. So that's your third homework assignment, is to just think about your follow-up plan before you walk in the door. again, we'll talk about different options, but just recognize that you'll need to have one and that you want to think about what kinds of things you can show them at home after the meeting you're having. Because one of the main points here in coming to Washington, D.C. is that this is not like a one-time deal. You don't just come for one conference and have one meeting and expect that they will do everything that you would like them to do. You really need to make this a long-term relationship, just like you would with any other sort of sales situation. So that follow-up plan is going to be really critical for your next steps. And speaking of your next steps, here's your checklist for getting ready. And I know that Ed and Katie are going to be sending a bunch of materials for you on the logistics of the meetings and the policy issues. I'm also going to check in to see if there's any follow-up questions. If you have a question, do type it into the Q&A box, and I can address it just to make sure that we've got everything addressed that we can. We will, of course, again, not going to abandon you. If you've got questions afterwards, you can always touch base with Ed or us. But if you've got questions now, type them into the Q&A box. Otherwise, I think if you've got your checklist, you've got your materials, you've got a quick overview of the issues, you've got some ideas about the schedules, and we finished all of that in an hour. So you guys are rocking and rolling and ready to go. And I did have one question, which is, since this is being recorded, can we get a copy? Yes, we are recording it for your benefit, so we will, I know we will get that link to Ed as soon as possible, hopefully within the next few hours, and then Ed will be able to post it on the NAED page, and he'll send it out in the email that's going tomorrow. So you will have all of that and the PowerPoint. You'll have more information than you could possibly want or need before you come to Washington, D.C. So with that, I'm going to let you all off into the world, and we look forward to seeing you here in D.C. next week. And have a great weekend and be prepared for some fun.